Hello and welcome to North Harrow Community Library YouTube channel. I'm very pleased, I'm Julie, I'm one of the trustees. I'm very pleased to welcome to join us today all the way from Grenada, the very lovely, very talented Brian Samuel. Hello.
Thank you very much, Julie. Good morning, good afternoon to you. Good morning to me from Grenada. And, nice to be here.
You're welcome to join us. So Brian has written this fantastic book, Song for My Father. It's fantastic. You must buy it. And you're going to do a little reading from it, and then we'll have a bit of a chat.
All right. Yeah. Well, here it is, and you might as well start at the beginning, I think. So this is the prologue. Excuse me. So page number 1. So where's your mom then? Is she dead? No. So where is she? She's not here. Yes, but where is she? In the playground of Fitzjohn's Primary School in London, this kid just wouldn't let up. I'd invited him back to our flat after school the previous evening. Big mistake. And he'd noticed that there wasn't a mum in the house. The next day, he was on me like a rash. Where's your mum? But how could I answer the question when I myself didn't know? My brothers and I had no clue where our mother was, nor did we spend too much time thinking about it, to be honest. But ever since we landed in England, that's all everybody seemed to want to know. Where's your mum? I don't frigging know, okay? People never asked me this question in Trinidad. Why is it such a big deal here? It was August 1961, and we'd recently moved into a 2-bedroom flat, 41B Arkwright Road, Hampstead, our home for the next 2 years. Our family consisted of me, age 8, and my big brothers, Tom and Jerry. Yeah, you heard that right, Tom and Jerry. And our father, Darwin Fitzgerald, aka Jerry Samuel, a teacher. As we're beginning to realize, we weren't your typical British family. We were an all-male, highly nuclear family. No mother, no sisters, no cousins, uncles, aunties, or grandparents. Just the 4 of us. What's so strange about that? 2 years earlier in Port of Spain, our mother simply hadn't come home from work one day. And that was that. She was gone. In West Indian families, then and now, children are on a need-to-know basis. And clearly, we didn't need to know. All we knew was that Mummy's gone away for a while. A year later, we traveled by ocean liner from Trinidad to England. And after a succession of cold, cramped council flats into the relative luxury of Arkwright Road. Not that we were suffering without a mum. Mum did funny things, like make you take your shoes off in the house and cut the crust off your sandwiches. What's that all about? And was her absence the reason why we were always on the move, running from pillar to post? To this day, I still love the looks on people's faces when I tell them my brothers are actually called Tom and Jerry. Jerry came first. Jerry was born in 1950 in London, followed by Tom, born in Grenada in November of the same year. Then a gap of 3 years before I came along, the runt of the litter, born in 1953 in Grenada. My big brothers, Tom and Jerry, so close in age, so different in nature. I call them the wild one and the mild one. I guess I was growing up in their wake, so I guess I subconsciously copied bits of both of them. So I've ended up as a bit of a hybrid, generally mild, but with a bit of a wild side. Or is it vice versa? In February 1942, in the depths of the Second World War, my father, 19-year-old Darwin Samuel, signed up for a scheme to go to Britain to work in the armaments industry. Even the real threat of U-boats couldn't deter him. Anywhere was better than small island, no opportunity Grenada. Via a harrowing Atlantic crossing, which he was lucky to survive, Darwin disembarked in Liverpool to a city reeling under the onslaught of the Blitz. He qualified as a machinist and worked on the production line for the iconic Lancaster bomber at Metrovic's factory in Manchester, a prime target of the Luftwaffe. Throughout the war, my father endured. Failure was not an option. Not then, not ever. After the war, Darwin stayed on in England, one of the few and the far between. Black immigrant pioneers enduring stares from children in the street and skeptical look from landladies. Is he dark in my sheets? Although Darwin never achieved his dream of studying law, he qualified as a metalworking and technical drawing teacher, putting to good use the skills he'd learned during the war. In 1950, 2 years after the voyage of the Empire Windrush had given birth to a flood of West Indian migration to England, our father went in the opposite direction, home. He married Scottish nurse Helen Hogan, and in short order, their first son, Jerry, was born. Full of hope and optimism, 20-year-old Darwin Samuel and his brand new family took ship to Grenada. After 8 hard years in England, he'd had enough and was excited to be going home. A man on the up. Pity it didn't last. 10 years later, in Port of Spain, our mother vanished without warning, thrusting their 3 young sons onto the sole care of their ill-prepared father. To say he was unprepared was putting it mildly. He was in a state of shock. But despite his shock, there was one thing he knew that he would never do: abandon his boys. In seeking to rebuild his shattered life, our father decided to rejoin the Windrush generation and return to England. There was nothing left for him in Trinidad anymore but bitter memories. When we disembarked in Liverpool docks on that cold morning in August 1960, I'd just turned 7, and England would already be my 5th country. A nomadic pattern that endures to this day. Unlike most of the Windrush generation, our journey didn't stop when we got off the boat. That was just the beginning.
Fantastic. There we go. What a start. What a start to a really, really interesting book. And an interesting life that you and your family, you know, your brothers and your father had. I want to just ask you, though, just kind of like going back, what made you write this book?
Looking back, you know how it is, you get to a certain age and, you know, you start getting nostalgic and so on. And we have a lot of photographs going back to my father and myself and my brother. We're all cameramen. We all have Canons and Nikons and what have you, always have. So I had a ton of old photographs going back to the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. And I noticed that they started getting, you know, in bad condition, you know, in the albums, they started fading and so on. So I went through a process of scanning them so that I could keep them. And every time I scan one, some of them I'd look through and, you know, I'd remember a story. And, you know, my kids would be around and I'd say, look at this. And I'd write a story about it. And this is the early days of email and so on and so on. I'd send it to, you know, family and so on. And they said, keep it up, Dad, keep it up, keep it up. And here we are. There's a lot of photographs in the book. There's a lot of, well, you know, like the Jim Croce song, Photographs and Memories. It's really a lot of, my father was a hoarder. So we have letters, a lot of letters between him and his brother, him and his grandfather, and so on and so forth. We have diaries. We have all this. It's a minefield of material. So I started to tell the story. And it basically took 10 years. The easy part was writing the story. The hard part was writing the pain. And that didn't happen until COVID. When I retired yet again. I keep retiring, but it never seems to stick. And, you know, in COVID, we've all got a year with nothing to do. And we started to grapple with this and to write it. And it was my wife who said, you're leaving out the emotional parts. You cannot do that. You're being honest. And that was the hardest part, but here we are.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, the aspects of the book, you know, aspects of your childhood, you know, and some of the kind of, I want to say adventures, but some of them were obviously more serious. You know, you went through quite a lot of things that must have been quite traumatic, I guess, and upsetting, and, you know, and yet the book is written with a really light touch until a little bit further on, you know. So when you're looking back on your childhood experiences,
yes,
as I say, it's written with a very light touch. It's kind of like, oh well, yeah,
it's fun. We had fun. I mean, you know, 3 boys.
We moved on.
Yeah.
It's only sort of in the later part of the book, I think, that pain starts to come in, and that kind of I don't know, what the word is, but you know, so kind of, I suppose, resentment and
yes, and which is kind of what happens, because kids are amazingly resilient. You know, you see some children, I've seen them myself, when their mother or their father or a near relative dies, they take it with more aplomb than we do.
Yeah.
They handle it. You know, when our mother went missing, it's like, yeah, all right. And, you know, I don't remember crying, missing my mother. I don't remember wetting my bed, missing my mother. I don't remember being really, really sad, missing my mother until I got later.
Yeah.
Until then, and then I met her, and then that's another matter altogether. And then I really got sad. But yes, you know, it's as kids, you just you want fun, and you know, 3 boys, and our father, single father, he was a teacher, and in the evening he sold World Book Encyclopedia, and he went to night school.
Yeah.
So we were the original latchkey kids. You can imagine 3 kids growing up in the streets of Hampstead, Kilburn, West Hampstead, you know, with all our
Harrow,
mates and so on.
as it turns.
And Harrow. We moved out to Harrow later on, yes.
Yeah. Later on, you lived in Kenton.
That's right, yeah.
You know, well, it's in the borough of Harrow.
That's my ends, isn't it?
Yeah, ends. Kenton is your ends. But also, I want to sort of talk a little bit more about just going back to the research. So we're going to jump around here because this is just how these things go. So obviously you spoke about photographs, letters, you know, etc. But you did a lot of, well, it seems, you know, background research into the life of your grandfather as well.
Yes.
So in terms of sort of obviously setting the scene.
Right.
Your father's early departure and, you know, obviously the relationship that he had with his dad.
Yeah,
I think it's
one priceless.
How did you piece that together? Your granddad.
Well, we literally uncovered this. I mean, unearthed it. It was in somewhere in the back. He built this house, which is in the book. There's a chapter in the book called "A Year in the Life of a Peasant Proprietor," and that's my grandfather, Nathan Dennis, aka ND Samuel. Even his children called him ND. Everybody called him ND. And he was a most remarkable man because he was a black man born in, it would have been like, not long after slavery. He would have been born in the 1860s or 70s or something like that. About a generation after the end of slavery in Grenada. Yeah. Black man, self-educated. He would not have been educated at school. He read, he was very literate. Don't know how he made his money. He may have gone to Panama, he may have gone to Aruba, he may have gone to the mines, but he came back to Grenada with a certain amount of money, and he set himself up as a farmer. He had a small estate called Mount Rose, and he built a house called Mount Rose, which still stands. And about 10 years later, they were doing some renovations, and they came across this diary. Fascinating. This thing is priceless. It's all written in my grandfather's very neat and tidy hand. And he uses the diary as a diary. He also used it as an accounting book for sale of cocoa, sale of nutmegs at £3, 2 shillings and 6 minus 7.5% discount equals X amount, all written down. That year in Grenada was an incredible year, both for Grenada and for him personally. In the first half of the year, his son very mysteriously and very quickly got sick and died. I've showed it to some doctors. I've shown what he said about it, and some people said it may have been a very virulent form of cancer. 2 weeks after he died, my father arrived back in Grenada from England. This was in 1950, and he came with his white wife. My grandfather was a Garveyite. He was a black nationalist.
Happy about that, then.
He wasn't happy about this white woman. I know my mother, and I know what she's like. She's very mouthy, you know. And I could imagine that the clash between 2 of them would have been dynamic. And it was in his diary. He vents about this woman. She's lazy. She's this. She's that. And that. And that. And that. And that. And also in Grenada at that time, Grenada went through almost a revolution. Another young man came to Grenada the same time as my father, and they became friends with Eric Gary. Eric Gary was a trade unionist, and he just turned the whole of Grenada upside down. There were strikes, there were riots, there were fires. The British government had to send a destroyer to Grenada. Not the first time Grenada's been invaded, nor the last. had to send a destroyer and a whole squadron of police to restore order and so on. And all this was going on. And my grandfather wrote it all down in his diary. So as a historical thing, it's quite a valuable find. Yeah. And I'm really glad to have put that in the book.
And how was it for you going back to Grenada and sort of with a white mum? Was that, I mean, I know you said how your granddad was that, but the rest of the kind of, because I know we'll touch on it a bit, you know, you speak about in your book when you've had, you know, racism issues in various different places, mostly here in the UK, but how, you know, how is that sort of being mixed race in the Caribbean at the time when you went back?
Well, yeah, I mentioned my nomadic life, and you know, when I was 18, my father crazily moved me from Harrow to Kingston, Jamaica.
Yeah,
which is insane. You know, I'm literally between lower sixth and upper sixth, but it was the best thing that happened to me.
Thing I meant to ask you again. Sorry to interrupt you, but otherwise it go out of my head. That your dad was a teacher, and yet he uprooted you and your brothers.
Yes, because he knew I wasn't going anywhere in the English. I wasn't going anywhere in the English school system.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but even before that, you know,
it's crazy. I mean, that moved we went to America when I was 13, 14. We had a year in America. I shook hands with President Lyndon Johnson in the White House because it was a big exchange teachers thing, and you know, so we had incredible experiences. But I always kind of grew up. When I moved to England at age 7, I really didn't know what race was. You know, we in Trinidad, the kids next door were white or whitish. They were Indian kids, there was black kids, there was brown kids. It never, you know, we'd say eeny, meeny, miny, moe, catch a by the toe. But that was it. We didn't even know what that was. It was a non-factor. Then I come to England at age 7, and the first thing in school, they're calling me chocolate face and nignog and walk. And I'm like, what the hell is this? It really was, you know, quite something. Then, so I grew up. So I'm in England and I grew up. I'm comfortable in my skin. In England, there's no difference between black and brown. There's a huge difference in Jamaica. So I go to Jamaica. Second day in Kingston, I'm walking around the street, not really happy to be in Jamaica because I didn't want to go. And I hear there's a little beggar kid, a little urchin on the road, and he says, "Hey, white boy, give me $1." So I looked around and I don't see any white boy. And I said, "Who are you talking to?" He says, "You, white boy." I said, "What?" Me? So, you know, it teaches you the folly of race. It really does. You know, at one place, people look at me as black, and the other place, they look at me as white. It's crazy. You know? So, but yeah, going to Jamaica was a life-changing move for me and a life-changing move for the better.
Yes, and so, you know, from what I read in the book, it seems to be a real turning point in your life where maybe
it
you
absolutely
really found yourself and you got in your groove.
Well, you know, like his careers day at St. Greg's in Kenton. Right, Samuel, what do you want to be? You know, says the disinterested careers master. Well, sir, my dad says, never mind what your dad says, Samuel, what do you want to be? Well, sir, I'd like to be a lawyer. Don't be stupid, boy. You can't be a lawyer. You'll never be a lawyer. Now, how about, I see you're doing carpentry. How about that? Carpentry, yes, tick. Next. That's it. I went to Jamaica, and the teachers, for the first time in my life, told me, Brian, you're very intelligent. Me? And in 1 year, I turned around and passed 3 A-levels very well and got into university. I could have gone back to England. This was 1973, 3. I would have gotten a grant. You remember those? Well, you wouldn't remember those things.
I do. I do. I'm not that far behind you.
There were days when the government would pay you to go to university. And I could have easily done that. But by that time, I was hooked on Jamaica. And I didn't want to go back to England. I felt home. Yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And you met some rather famous people as well, didn't you? You were living
Yes. There's I mean, you know, Jamaica in those days, Bob Marley was just Bob Marley. He wasn't, you know, he was a superstar and everything else like that. You'd see him all the time. You know, you go to where he had his house. People go there and buy weed and stuff like that. So Bob was just Bob. And there was a couple of times when I was on stage with him. and took a few pictures, which are in the book. The Bob Marley Stevie Wonder concert, which was iconic. I was on stage for that, and there's some pictures of Bob and Stevie on stage. So yeah, there's a couple of famous people in there. It says he name dropping.
Me and Stevie were like that.
Yeah, me, Stevie and Bob.
Oh, that's fantastic. So did you find it, all the moving about? And I know you've said it's in your blood now, and you've carried on moving. What, you've moved 23 times or something and lived in?
When I moved back to Grenada and 3 years ago, that was the 22nd time I'd moved country, and I've lived in 10 countries.
Yeah, wow.
It's crazy.
But as a child, did you feel that you were being uprooted? Did you, or was it all a big adventure?
It was all a big adventure, really. The move I didn't like was coming to England. I mean, growing up in Trinidad and Grenada was pretty close to boy heaven.
Yeah.
You know, we had friends next door. There was carnival once a year. You was the beach. Our father worked for T&Tech for the electricity company, and he drove a nice car. We live real middle class life. And to swap that for coming to England in a council flat and a coal fire, we were like, the end of the world is nigh. It's arrived, you know. Then you get over it. Then you become accustomed. And then there was the America move. Now that was like 1 year adventure. It was just like, wow. Color TV, air conditioning, you know. It's like McDonald's. Wow.
Fantastic. So I think it's interesting because you're absolutely right. You said your story was quite atypical. You know, your mum left. That doesn't happen often. You know, wherever your culture, wherever it's usually the other way around. If anybody really tends to be the dad. And your dad, obviously, you know, there was no question in his mind that he was going to leave you. You know, he was going to take the three of you with him, and kind of all the rest of it. And yet, your father kind of, and maybe I'm completely wrong here, but it seemed like almost his moving around and taking you with him without kind of like a thought for your education or whatever. Seemed quite kind of at odds with, it was kind of like he'd given everything up for you, but on the other hand, he was kind of following his own kind of thing, taking you with him. Have I misinterpreted that? Have I read that wrongly?
The move to Jamaica was, in hindsight, a brilliant one, although in foresight it may not have appeared so. The move to America, personally for us, as kids growing up, was fantastic. Yeah. But when we got back to England, we paid a price educationally because, we'd not done 3rd, 4th, and 5th form. Those are crucial years. So when I went back to England in 67, I was 14, and they put me in a remedial class because I had not done, the foundation classes and so on. So yeah, it did have drawbacks. But if you look at the overall thing, I think that the experience
worked out fine in the end.
The experiences that we had over there were just amazing, and it really, it's still with us now. You could probably hear it in my voice. It was, and our father also did other things, like he would take us to museums. Every Sunday was a museum, or oh God, another one, and he would buy the nosebleed seats at the West End cinema. We would take the train down from Kenton to the West End, 7, 8 o'clock, wait outside, and hopefully get one of the the seats at the end when
and that's amazing. That's a really
you have the little glasses,
varied childhood, isn't it, where you've done a little bit of everything. You've seen that kind of high culture, I suppose. And I don't know, you probably did the everyday stuff, like go to watch the football, cricket,
get in trouble in school, right?
And not tell your dad.
When I see these kids nowadays, I have to laugh. And these, what do you call them, helicopter parents? See daddy, the little boy is riding his bicycle. He's got his helmet and his pads and his knee pads, and he's going out, and daddy's running behind him. I'm like, my father would never have any clue what we were doing, where we were just on our own.
They can't get away with anything now either. If you don't turn up for school, they're on the phone to your mum. Not here. It wasn't like that in my day.
Thank God it wasn't.
But anyway,
Yeah,
setting a bad example for our But
I mean, growing up, I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, when you got a mother and a father, you got more eyes on the prize. You know, when you're just growing up with a single parent who works full time and overtime, you know, you're on your own a lot, which didn't hurt us.
yeah. No, and you had each other as well, and obviously
Yeah, yeah.
very close,
We,
you know, the three of
we
you.
were thick as thieves. Me,
Yeah.
Tom, and Jerry. Still are. I mean, sadly, my brother Tom died in 2014.
Yeah.
But right up until then, every summer, where's Tom? Where's Jerry? Where's Brian? That's where I'm going. We've not lived in the same country. The three of us have not lived in the same country since I left in 1971. It's always two here and one there. Two in England, two in Jamaica, two in America, two here, two here. We all do that. But we are extremely close, and so are our children. You know, it's one thing I've learned from my father is the art, if you will, of fatherhood. You know, I had him as an example, but I also, every generation, we try and improve, we try and get better, we try and learn from the past and look forward. So, I mean, I have 5 children and we're all thick as thieves, even though one lives in England, one lives in Jamaica, one lives in America, one lives in Grenada, and so on and so forth.
Apple doesn't fall far from the tree then.
So when we have things like a wedding, it's a lot of air miles involved.
So what about I mean, you know, you spoke about writing the pain, etc., and you know, and later on in life you reconnected with your mother. Did you find writing the book, if it doesn't sound too corny, a kind of form of catharsis? Yeah. Did you find it therapeutic?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I carried this woman around all my life in not a good way. You know, I suppressed my feelings. Then when we met her, I'm not going to spoil the plot or anything by saying this, but me and Tom stood in front of her at her desk in Nassau where we found her. And she says, "Who are you?" And we stood there. We said, "Are you Nelline Darville?" She says, "Yes." "Were you married to Jerry Samuel?" She says, "Yes." Still nothing clicked, nothing twigged. She's like, "Who are you?" And you know, you kind of milk the moment. And then Tom said, "We're Tom and Brian, your sons." Oh my God, oh my God, and hug and kiss and tears. You didn't know me 10 seconds ago. So there was that. And it went kind of downhill from there. I don't want to, again, spoil the plot, but my mother was one of a kind.
We'll leave it at that.
Well, but to get to your point about, excuse me, the catharsis is that when she died in 2003, she was in Spain. I was living in Zimbabwe at the time. My brother Jerry was in London, and she'd been ailing with cancer for a while. And when I got the call at 2 o'clock in the morning, half expecting it, that she died, and I sat in the living room and I bawled. I didn't bawl for the mother that I had. I bawled for the mother that I never had.
And
it all kind of came out.
Yeah.
And then there were some other things, again, that I won't spoil that plot that's in the book that she did to me that was very, very difficult. And in writing the book, I got it out. And I want to thank my wife, Marion, because she read the first drafts and she goes, "Brian, this is kind of, you know, it's plastic, you know. Where's the emotion that I know you feel?" And she was the one that challenged me to get it out. And it took a while, but I did. and it's out. And
it's a fantastic read. And that's all we've got time for, really. So just flash in the book again.
Yes, yes.
Available from all good bookshops and some websites which shall remain nameless. Yes. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Julie V.
And hopefully we'll see you in the UK at some point soon.
You never know. I might have a very big engagement at a certain museum in London, but that shall be nameless.
Thank you very much.